Here's an example for you. As you see on the GMAT, you'll have a sentence, part of which is underlined. So part of it's underlined, and what our job is to do is to decide whether or not there's a mistake in the underlined portion. And if there is, we need to choose the answer choice that makes the proper correction or corrections. Sometimes there is more than one mistake. And then you'll see answer choices. If you'd like, you can press pause, take a stab at this one. We're going to come back and do this one together as I walk you through a methodology on how to do this. But if you feel like it, go ahead and press pause. All right, but first what I want to do is I want to teach you a step-by-step methodology for attacking sentence correction questions. Not because we want to be formulaic necessarily. These steps are going to become second nature for you, but because they're going to put you in the best position to get right answers and make sure that you're not distracted by your ear, that you don't go down the wrong rabbit hole here and get sidetracked by wrong answer choices. So here's an approach for you to effectively tackle sentence corrections. Step one, you want to start by reading the original sentence, and you want to try to identify an error before looking at the answer choices. And this is important, and this is going to take some training. Don't jump to the answer choices yet. You want to do, here you see a brain lifting weights. I call it doing brain work. The amount of brain work you can do before looking at the answers will help you zero in on possible right answers and avoid, just as importantly, being swayed by eye-catcher wrong answers. See, the amount of work that we can do beforehand, if we can pick up on a mistake, if we can notice a subject-verb disagreement, if we can find an error with a pronoun, if we can identify a misplaced modifier or an incorrect idiom, before we look at the answer choices, we're going to be in a great position to be able to eliminate wrong answer choices, not be swayed by them, and also zero in on the correct answers. So let's apply that to the sentence that I just put up on the screen. Step one, we want to look for errors in the original sentence, and here was our sentence. Efforts to equalize the funds available to school districts, a major goal of education reformers in many states in the 1970s, has not significantly reduced the gaps existing between the richest and poorest districts. Do you see a mistake? That's the question. Do you see a mistake? Specifically a mistake in the underlined portion. And notice I have answer choice A up here. That's because that's going to be the exact same. Notice that's the exact same repeat wording. We're not ready to select it yet. We're not ready to eliminate it yet. Have you noticed any mistake? Well, there are actually a couple mistakes, so there are potential for a couple of things that you could have correctly identified. The one that's most glaring for me that I see is a disagreement between subject and verb, subject-verb agreement. And when we get to sentence corrections part 2, you're going to see that checking for subject-verb agreements really the first line of defense. This is one of the first things that you want to look for in a sentence on the GMAT sentence corrections. And notice what I've done. This is a technique that I'm going to teach in detail in Sentence Corrections Part 2. But it's a technique where you literally isolate the parts of the sentence that matter. Notice what I've done is that I've readed out all of the unnecessary fluff in the sentence to isolate the subject, the verb, and the object. Because at their most basic, an English sentence must have a clearly defined subject, a verb that agrees with that subject, and then an object that receives the action of the verb. And so what I have done, and what you're going to be trained to do over time by me, is to zero in on these component parts and filter out everything else. So don't pay any attention to what's in red, but notice, do the subjects and verb agree? Well, we have efforts has not reduced the gaps. If you were to break it down to the most simple sentence, that would be your sentence. Efforts has not reduced the gaps. Is that correct? Well, clearly, once we zero in on that, we recognize the answer is no. Why not? Well, the subject of the sentence is efforts. Efforts is plural. The verb is has not technically. That is singular. Those don't agree. So here's a rule for you. The verb of the sentence must always agree with the subject of the sentence, obviously. Therefore, the word has must be changed to have to agree with that plural subject, efforts. I have a question for you. Why can't we change the word efforts? Why can't we leave has? Has not could be correct, right? Maybe we can change the subject to something singular. You could, here's the thing, the subject, efforts, is not underlined. The mistake on sentence corrections is going to appear, if there is a mistake, in the underlined portion. That's what we're correcting. So I'm going to talk about this as well in sentence corrections part 2. But that's something to really look out for. A lot of times something in the underlined portion dictates the change we need to make in the underlined portion. And in this case, the word efforts is locked in stone. The only thing that we can change is the word has, and we have to change it to the word have. Does that make sense? Which brings us to step 2. If we do detect an error in our own mind, we do that brain work, that advanced brain work, and we figure out an error, which we just did. We haven't even looked at the answer choices yet. Once we detect it in the original sentence, or if the sentence is confusing, I'm going to show you some examples over the course of the rest of this video and then in future videos, where the sentence itself is confusing to the point where there's got to be an error. I might not figure out what that error is, but I can hardly understand what the sentence is trying to say. Well, you have lived and spoken English long enough that even if we don't want to rely solely on our ear, if you can't even understand what the sentence is trying to say, there's got to be a mistake in there. Does that make sense? I mean, there's got to be something dramatically wrong if you can't even understand what the author is trying to say. In either of these cases, we can immediately eliminate answer choice A. And what you want to do is you want to physically cross it off your scratch paper, as we have taught as a way to eliminate wrong answer choices. And so here we go again. Here's our sentence. Answer choice A, we haven't even really looked at B, C, D, and E. We've done that advanced brain work. We know there's a mistake. We'll try to figure out what that mistake is, but we can definitely cross off answer choice A. And then we move on to step 3. If an error is detected, which we've already done, we actually have identified an error, the subject-verb disagreement situation, in the original sentence, then what we do is we go to the answer choices, and we eliminate any answer choices that don't make that correction. So we know that word has to be changed to have. And now what we can do is move to the answer choices and find which ones make that correction and eliminate any that don't. If you saw more than one mistake, like you may have seen a mistake, maybe you didn't pick up on the subject-verb agreement situation that I started with, that's okay. It doesn't mean what you found is wrong. We'll see. We'll get there because there are more than one mistake in that sentence. Just deal with each one by one. And then if you're left with a couple of answer choices left, then we got to go back and weed between those two. I'm going to teach you how to do that. But make sure before you're going to definitively eliminate an answer choice, make sure that you're really confident in it. Like the subject-verb agreement there is so obvious, especially after what I teach you in part 2 with respect to subject-verb agreement, that you're convinced, you're right, the subject and verb don't currently agree, here's how they do agree. I feel confident crossing off wrong answers. But if you're only kind of certain, like maybe there's a subject-verb disagreement, or maybe there's something wrong with one of the pronouns, don't stab blindly in the dark, because there are going to be other ways for us to filter through and eliminate wrong answers without having to make guesses this early in the game. So in this case, we are confident. We are sure that the word has needs to be changed to have, and so we can eliminate answer choices B and C. They don't make that change. They can be crossed off. Fairly simple, but this is the process that you want to go through on test day for sentence corrections. And then we move on to step 4. If more than one answer choice remains, which it does in this case, now we have to choose somehow between answer choice D and E, or there's a chance no mistake was detected. Now, that doesn't mean you immediately choose answer choice A. Just because you didn't see a mistake doesn't mean one wasn't there. So whether or not you didn't see one to begin with, and now all 5 answer choices are still on the table, or we've eliminated a couple answer choices, which is what we've done in this example, but you still have a couple of answer choices left, now what do we do? Now what do we do? Well, I said if all 5 are left, that doesn't mean you just immediately choose A. You want to do the same thing in both cases. We now need to filter through our mental checklist of common GMAT grammar mistakes. And this is going to be covered in sentence correction part 2, subject-verb agreement, pronoun errors, idioms. There's a whole host of possible mistakes that could be in that sentence. And the other thing we can do is we can actually look to the answer choice for clues. In other words, we have some answer choices up there. We haven't seen a mistake, but what we can do is we can look at the answer choices themselves and say, oh, okay, what differences are there? Think back to this example. You noticed In some cases, the word has is left as has, and in a couple it's changed to have. Now, you may not have picked up on that on the first read through when you were doing your own mental brain work, but now that it's staring at you black and white and we're looking at the answer choices, it kind of tips you off. Maybe that's a mistake. Maybe it's not. It doesn't necessarily mean it is a mistake. But in a couple of answer choices, it's have. Now you can say, oh, okay, that's an area I need to, okay, what do I know about subject-verb agreement? Would it need to, okay. And then you have the ability and luxury of going back and doing that. So in this example then, we're already confident that this verb needs to change to the word have, but where do the other differences exist? What other differences are there? Well, I have them circled. In answer choice D, the word is gap. In answer choice E, the word is gaps. That's a question. Should it be gap? Should it be gaps? I don't know. We'll look at that. And the other difference that I see is between the word exists and existing. Answer choice E changed exists to existing. Actually leaves it as existing. Existing is how it is in the original sentence. Is that correct? Or would it need to change to the word exists? I don't know. We'll look at it. Well, I do know. We'll come back to that in a second. But let me go back to step number 4. So if more than one answer remains, or if we're choosing really between all 5, how do we choose between them? 1, you go through that common checklist of common grammar mistakes. 2, we look to the answer choices for clues and again apply it back to that checklist, figure it out. But the third thing we can do is apply what I call GMAT effectiveness rules. Remember, sentence corrections test 2 things. Not only correct English expression, i.e. is it correct grammatically, but it also tests effective use of English language. So with that, let me turn our attention to effectiveness rules. But first, step number 5. If after going through the checklist in step 4, if you still do not detect a mistake in the original sentence, then the answer choice is A. So we didn't immediately detect a mistake when we did our initial brain work. Then we filtered it through our grammar checklist. Still no mistake. Then we looked for differences in the answer choices, and you know what we said? Well, I see the differences, but you know what? I still don't think we're supposed to make any changes here. And then we look at the effectiveness rules. Only then would we say, okay, there's nothing wrong here. I'm going with the answer choice A, and feel good about that. Pat yourself on the back. Say, hey, 1/6 of the time the answer is going to be A anyway. This is one of those times. Probably a right answer if you go through this full process and do that.